All right, I'm going to start up. So we have gone through the first 10 chapters of the book. The idea is hopefully by early next week, we'll go through the next 8. Again, you will only be responsible for the homework through chapter 14. All right. Now, a week from today, the chapter 9 and 10 stuff is due. So please make sure if you've got any problems, you get it in by then. Maybe even the day before, maybe Thursday, we'll go over the written tests for 9 and 10. That should give people enough time. All right. But what I want to do today at a minimum is go through chapters 11 through 13 and possibly even 14, which is a short chapter. If we can get through that many today, then on Monday of next week, we'll go through 15 through 18, and then we'll be done with the book. All right. And then Tuesday, I will give you some kind of a pre-test, basically, for your 9-10 test. So we're like a little bit behind test-wise. All right. Then on Thursday of next week, then I would start going into the bootstrap stuff with you. Friday will probably just make it a lab day then. All right. So getting into this, I'm just going to jump right into chapter 11. And again, there's a lot of stuff. Some of this stuff we've had already or talked about at least somewhat. Some of it we've talked very little to nothing about. All right. But I want to concentrate on the stuff that I think is the most important to you. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. All right. So when you look in here, the basic skills for working with images, the key one is right in the middle there. How to resize an image. Now, some of that you've looked at already. I've shown you, bless you, I've shown you how you could take an image, bring it into Paint, and resize it that way. But we're talking about having it resize as the page resizes. All right, so we'll take a look at that. Some of these advanced skills, yeah, it's not that it's not important, but we're going to hit on it when we get into the JavaScript stuff as well, just so you know. And the related skills, well, the one thing to tell you about that, I've already talked to you about pixels, and I've talked to you about Unsplash, and I've also mentioned to you, never go out to a site and grab their images and put them on your site. Just don't do that. If you think, I got to have this image, at a minimum, send an email to the site owner or a contact us page at the site and say, hey, would it be possible to do this? They may even say no, but you can link to it, for example. All right. And if you ever do have correspondence like that, keep a running total of it, just in case they come back later. You may have heard about this. This was probably a good 10 years ago. There was a guy, no joke, he owned a dry cleaning shop. I think it was outside of Phoenix. I could be wrong, but I think it was. And his last name was McDonald. And for whatever reason, he painted his sign red, and he put arches on the outside of his sign. Would you believe within 24 hours he got a cease and desist order from McDonald's? So that what I'm saying is you don't want to set yourself up for any kind of trouble. That doesn't make any sense to do that. All right. Now, I've even mentioned to you as far as pixels go rather, and Unsplash. It's not that you have to in the alt tag put that thank you in there, but it's a good thing. I mean, if somebody sees their stock photo and they look, they might even actually go and do a right mouse click and look and see if you thank them, like they said. And why do you do that? So they keep putting pictures out there, right? All right, they're getting a little bit of thank you. They're not asking for money. I don't think they're really asking for a whole heck of a lot, period. Again, if you don't agree with that, I can't make you do it, and I wouldn't try even if I could. All right. So the first thing they start talking about in here are the different types of images. And the first one is the JPEG file. And some JPEG files, I never have understood this. Maybe it's explained in here and I just didn't read it. I don't know. But sometimes when you create a JPEG file, it's saved as .jpg, and sometimes it's saved as .jpeg. They're both JPEG files. All right. Notice what it says. They typically contain high quality images to begin with. All right. And they don't support transparency. If you don't know what that is, you're going to see it in here. All right. It says you usually don't need it for the color of a photograph. Now, GIF files back in the olden days, like when I started teaching and we had WordPerfect that we used, they had very little clip art in there. But they had this guy that literally looked like I could have made him, and I have no artistic ability whatsoever. And that was a little GIF thing that you put in there. All right. And so typically those are used for things like, I don't know, like logos, real cheap looking logos and stuff like that. It says there's a couple of advantages. They can be compressed, which means you can run file compression programs on them to make them smaller. Usually if you do that with a JPEG file, it can actually hurt it if you run too much transparency on it. But with GIFs, it typically doesn't matter. All right. Also with GIFs, they can animate. So when we saw this little thing of clip art, you could make him walk, it was a guy, you could make, or look like one, you could make him walk across the screen. Oh, that was cool. All right. Unlike GIF and JPEGs that have been used for years, PNG were developed specifically for the web. And a lot of people have said that PNG files, portable network graphic files, they're kind of a compromise between GIFs and JPEGs. All right. And as it says, it was developed as a replacement for the GIF format. The advantage is better compression, it supports millions of colors, and it allows you to do transparency. Now, one thing that was added in this edition of the book that wasn't in the previous edition of the book is this last paragraph. And you may have already tried to go and download files from Google Images or whatever that are WebP files. WebP files are basically, they were created by Google as an alternative to some of this other stuff. As it says, the main goal of WebP is to provide smaller, better quality images that can be displayed more quickly. They're typically used to replace PNGs and JPEG files. Now, there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of programs out there too that allow you to convert a file from JPEG to PNG, etc. All right, and a lot of them are out there for free. Now, why would you want to do that? Typically, you wouldn't have to do that, but if for some reason you wanted to, you could. So there's this chart on page 393. I'm not going to go over any of it because we just did. All right, but they show you some JPEGs, they show you some GIFs. You can see, if you remember, with that San Joaquin Town Hall, I believe that's pretty much what their image looked like right here. All right. So how to include an image on a page. Guess what? You know how to do that already. And you know that this is a very simple tag that doesn't have an end tag to it. All right. And you also know that what you should put in there is image, source equals, and the path to the image, and then alt equals for the alternative text. At a minimum, that's what you should put in there. And that's typically what most people do put in there. As far as resizing an image, as it says, figure 11.2 shows you how to do this with CSS. It resizes the second image so it's half of its original value. It says in this case, both the height and the width were specified. But if you just do one, you get the same result. Most people just specify the width. All right, and the height comes along, with it, for lack of better words. It says the trouble with resizing an image is that the image is still downloaded at its full size before it's reduced. Why does that matter? It matters if it's a very intricate image that is very big, because it can increase the load time then for your program. All right. It says you should also remember that you can resize an image by making it scalable, and we're going to get into that. All right, it says you typically do that when you create a web page with a fluid layout. Remember, we talked, this is review, but we talked about the 3 keys to a fluid layout. I'm sorry, to a flexible layout. Fluid, or fluidity, being able to resize images, and our media queries that we've talked about earlier. All right. So it's been years since I put the height and the width in on an image. All right. I don't see any reason for doing that. Now, if you say, what if I want to change it? Well, I've already shown you. I've talked about one way of changing it. I've demonstrated it to you with paint. And I also showed you that GIMP. And you can use that for changing size as well. But this is a typical tag. Again, I would say without the height and the width that's in there. All right. Now, again, notice it says CSS for resizing a second image, and they've done it that way. I wouldn't recommend ever resizing an image that way. If you do need to do resizing, I'd recommend using percentages. All right, because they're using absolute units here as opposed to flexible units. All right. Says to display an image at a size other than its full size, you can use the CSS height and width properties. Better, though, is to use an image editor to correctly set the size. All right. Now, next thing in here is alignment of images. And they talk here about aligning things vertically. This is a tie-in to what I showed you with the pretest the other day. If you remember, I had the Alfano's pizza. I just had a pepperoni pizza. And then right next to it, it said Alfano's or Alfano's pizza. It was the image that I used the vertical align property on, and I set it to middle. All right. Do you ever have to use these? Well, I mean, look at the pictures that they show here at the bottom here of page 397. Now, you may look at it and say, well, you know, I don't really see much difference. Well, on the left, by default, the text is on the bottom. On the right, it's in the middle. Now, you may not even agree that it's in the middle, but the point is, how intricate do you want to be with this? Probably, I'm going to guess at least, if you created a website for someone and you gave them this, they probably wouldn't care. And if you gave them this, they probably wouldn't notice. All right, but it's just how complete do you want to be? As it says on the bottom of the page here, if you use pixels, points, or ems to specify the value for the vertical align property, the image is raised if it's positive and lowered if it's negative. So you can kind of move it around. If you apply a percent, it's raised or lowered based on the percentage. And again, you could use margin, padding, and borders with images. We've already seen that. All right. Floating, we've talked about floating an image before. And again, if you look on the screen here, there is an example of floating an image. All right. But really, you know, with the advent of Flexbox, that's not done that much anymore. But the point is, and I've said this to you on more than one occasion, and that is there are still hundreds, if not millions, of sites out there that use floating, and it's not going to go away. You know, you can come in there and say, hey, I can do the same thing for you, and I'll use Flexbox. And they'll be like, who cares? All right, it works. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. All right, so they talk in here about floating it to the left, and they also talk in here about clearing the float. Remember, you can float left, you can float right, and the default is float none. And if you float left or right, the idea is stuff continues to float to the left or right as much as it possibly can until you clear it. In fact, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, people put in something like this, which you'll see in your CSS, I probably showed you this already, is they'll put in a class that's called like ClearFix. Could be called clear, it doesn't matter. All right, but again, it'll say something like float none. All right, so that'll be in their CSS. And then in their HTML, when they don't want to float anymore, they'll just put in a div with no name, no nothing. All right, other than class equals ClearFix, and then they'll end the div. So that makes sure that if you were floating to the left or the right, it turns it off. You see that a lot, especially on a lot of older sites that are out there. You see that kind of stuff. So the good news is they show you the HTML here, and they also show you the CSS that you use with it. All right, so again, you can get very professional looking things like this, but again, this is the kind of thing you have to start thinking about. Okay, I've got this right here. It looks fine. If it's for a telephone, you know, you're seeing it on your phone, I'm going to guess that they're going to get rid of the picture and they're just going to stack everything. That's typically what you see. If you really needed the picture, of course, you could shrink it down too. All right. I have mentioned to you before, we have talked a little bit about a couple of the HTML5 semantic tags for figures, those being figure and fig caption. And again, when you provide these, more than anything else, and I don't even care what the hell the book says here, you're providing these things for people who are sight impaired. All right? Because, you know, if someone's been blind all their life, you say, hey, this is a really cool picture of a dinosaur. That means nothing to them. All right? But if you put in the figure and the fig caption in there, it'll mean more to them. So these are both, again, semantic tags. And as it says, the figure element can be used as a container for anything that's used as a figure. So as you'll see in an upcoming chapter, I think it's the next one, we'll talk about tables. All right, so you can even use it for a table if for some reason you want to do that. Tables also have a caption property. So I've never used one for a table, but you can. All right, as it says, it can be used within a figure to provide a caption that describes the figure, but it's optional. When coded, it can be anywhere within the figure element. By default, the fig caption is an inline element. All right, so you normally want to change that. Just set it to block. All right. Now, next they talk about this. This is kind of neat. Let's pretend for a second you knew nothing about media queries and you had, no desire to learn anything about media queries. All right? In this case, with this picture element, what you're saying is, hey, if it's 960 and above, use that picture. If it's 768 to 959, use that picture. And if it's 460 to 767, use that picture. It's like putting a media query in here, but you use a picture tag for this. All right, and this is one way you could work around that thing without having to put in media queries. All right. So as it says here, it's an HTML5 element. It says it provides more flexibility for adding images that adapt to various screen sizes without having to go to media queries. All right. Image rollovers, this is what they gave here. I wouldn't have put this example in. In fact, a lot of times what you see with an image rollover, I'm not going to go out there, but for instance, if I went out to www.com, which I think is Weight Watchers' site, and you see before and after pictures. You know, you roll your mouse over somebody and it's like they were like this, and now they're like this. You roll back out and it goes like this, that kind of thing. All right. There are a lot of different ways that you can do rollovers. All right. One way to do it is to use just CSS and HTML. What we will get to in a few weeks is another way to do it, in a way it's probably done more often, is to use JavaScript. All right. But they show you in here exactly what you do. All right. And it says it's an image that gets changed when the mouse hovers over it. One way to do that is, it says, is to use background images and the hover pseudo class selector. All right, but I think everybody at least gets the idea of what's going on with that. All right. I don't even know if I still have it, but I could check. I used to have a picture, a thing I created for students. It was a picture of Mount Rushmore. I didn't take it. It was something I pulled off Google Images. All right, and what I did was I made it into one of these image maps, which is what they talk about next. So if you know who's up there. So it's Washington, Jefferson, is it Lincoln and Roosevelt, I believe. So if you clicked on the face or anything on Washington, it would go to Washington's homepage. All right. A lot of times what you'll see for an image map is like a map of the United States. And if you click on any state, it'll go to that state's homepage. Another one that's very popular is for people who are in the medical field. And you might see a skeleton. And if you click on any part of the skeleton, it shows you what bones those are or whatever. All right. So that's typically what it's used as, not like they show right here. All right. And what happens is the places that you click on are called hotspots. All right. You can click anywhere on them to go to someplace else typically. If you do that, again, you typically want to open it up rather in a new tab with a target equals underscore blank, and you got to give it coordinates. That said, you can give it three kinds of shapes, I believe. I know there's a square, I think there's a circle, and then there's like a polygon. The polygon is when you've got real weird shapes that aren't circular and aren't squared. But if you can get as literal with this stuff as you want to or need to get. All right. And I think that's enough to say about that. All right. So image editors, again, I mentioned some of these. GIMP is the free one. Now it says Adobe Photoshop Elements and inexpensive editor. Well, it depends on how you define inexpensive. With a lot of these products, they might be only $5 a month, but it's $60 a year, you know? And when you start adding a bunch of these up, maybe it's not that cheap anymore. I don't know. So here's the difference between using an image with no transparency and using an image with a transparent background. And as they mentioned there, if an image with transparency is displayed over a colored background, the background shows through. All right, and it says if an image with a transparent color is displayed over a colored background, a matte of the same color will help the image blend into the background. So again, why is that important? You may or may not have noticed, but when I brought up that pizza page, it had the picture on there of it, but the background, I didn't have any transparency. So the background was white behind it. It wasn't a lot, but it was in there. All right, if I had taken some time, I probably could have changed that. Getting images, again, I've mentioned a couple sites to you. There's some other ones here that I have not talked about. Again, as it says, many of the images that are available on the web are licensed under Creative Commons. If you see that, all right, the thing with Creative Commons is, and you got to look this up, okay? But these are the different things. So attribution says you can use the images as long as you give credit as requested by the author or website. So Pexels and Unsplash don't demand that you give thanks. They ask that you do. If they said you can only use this if you give thanks to this person in your alt tag, then it would be attribution. All right. Share alike, as it says, you can distribute the image based on a license that governs the original work. Sometimes with that, you may even have to contact the owner. Non-commercial, you can use the image and stuff derived from it for non-commercial purposes only. In other words, you could use it for all your work here, but if you were to create a site for somebody and they were designed to bring customers in so they could make money off the site, at least technically, you couldn't do that. And then no derivative works. You can only use the original image and not the images derived from it. All right, you may have to link to the original image or whatever. As it says, stock photos are typically produced in studios and can be purchased. There are places for a one-time fee, maybe $100, like it says, maybe more, maybe less. They've got millions of pictures, and you can use them forever. And of course, there's good old Google Images. Icons. Well, a couple things about these. The ones that are used most often are the ones that are shown up on top there, and that's Font Awesome. All right. If you go to Font Awesome, notice it says it is a free open source library of 675 icons. Well, when you go and look at it, that's not what it looks like. What I mean is the icons, if you see one that's grayed out, that means it's not free. If you see one that's blackened as far as its color, it is free. So you can pay, I think it's about $60 a year, and then you can use any of the ones they have on there. The best ones are part of their premium package that you have to pay for. All right. Now, it used to be with a lot of software packages, they didn't, before Font Awesome got in vogue, they had their own icons. Is that terrible? No, but there wasn't a standard look and feel, all right, that you found between these. It's a little weird when you look at this, but this is typically how you use it. You put it in as an I tag, as it says right there, the class equals, all right, And this is, I don't remember what the S is, but that's Font Awesome something or other, Font Awesome Globe, Font Awesome Large. And when you put these in, a lot of times you can resize them, and large isn't the only way. You can put in a number with them, and as the number gets bigger, the size gets bigger. I think like 7 is about the max, all right, on a page. And once you play with them a little bit, you'll notice that. It's no big thing one way or the other. I'm not going to go over this favicon section because we did that already, all right? You know what a favicon is, and if you're expected to put one on a test, it's expected that you're going to do it. All right. Now, the next thing is scalable vector graphics, and these are actually cool because what these things do is they take the image, and typically it's not image, it's a circle or a square or whatever, and it sizes automatically as you change move the browser, which is kind of nice. In fact, one of the things that we do that these two will do in next semester, and you guys will do that in a year, is when we go into Android, we look at scalables because they provide for virtually every image that you get provided for you in Android. There is another one that's a scalable one. And if that means something to you as far as, hey, when my phone type changes or whatever, or when it goes from portrait to landscape, or it's going on a tablet, I want this to get bigger or smaller or whatever. That's a really common use for vector graphics. So it's SVG is the type. As it says, it's an open World Wide Web Consortium or W3C standard. All right. It says you can create them in HTML by using an SVG element. I don't believe there's anything on the test that goes through those. I would put money on it. All right. So that was quick. Let's bang out another one here before we take our break. And this is tables. This is how I'm going to show you tables. All right? And maybe not the best way, but this is the way I'm going to show them to you. So I'm going to come up here, and I don't need that open. I'm going to just come in here and let's see. Let's do a file, new file. I'm not going to worry about a folder or anything else. All right? Because I'm not going to save this. So I'm just going to do a file, save as, and I'll throw it on my desktop. And I'm going to call it just table.html. All right? And do what we always do, which is this. Come in here and type in table. All right? Now, just to show you a few of these things, I'm going to create a quick table. All right? So, as you probably guessed, tables go within table tags. All right? And typically, the first thing that you have at the top is what's called a THead. And then inside of there, you put your table header. Oops. All right. And your table header, so let's say I had in here, first name, last name, and I don't know, major. Okay. All right. So that's what's in my THead section. In fact, typically, I was wrong. There should be a T row here, which is a TR tag. We're going to go over all this stuff in just a minute. I'm just quickly throwing something together here so that you can look at it. All right. Now, if I save this and bring this up, it's not going to look like much. Maybe it's not going to look like anything. Open, oh, okay, it does want a folder, great. All right, file. I'll do it like this, forget that. So there it is. So that's what it looks like. Not really very much. All right, first name, last name, major. Now, one way that I can make it start to look a little bit nicer, is to come in here and say, hey, I've got that table. This is one time where it's kind of acceptable to put in something here. So I'm going to put in border equal 1. And you'll notice that as soon as I do that, it starts looking a little bit more like a table. All right, I'm not saying that looks like a table, okay, but you get the idea. So if I come in here, and now I'm going to put in the body of this. And that's typically in a T body tag. And I'm going to again put a TR in here for a table row. So let's see, we'll have, that'll have to be a TD in here. So TD, that's for table data. All right, we'll put in here John. I'm going to copy this 3 times. Smith, and of course, his major is AWD. All right, and I'm just going to grab and make 3 of these. All right, it always screws up the tabbing that way, but I don't care. But if I save this now and take a look at what we've done, now it's looking a little bit more. I screwed up the tabs, but they should all look like the first one. All right, so I'm going to fix that right now. Now, if you go, that's just really ugly. Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. All right, so let's go back and fix this because I screwed it up. So the first one, this one was fine. All right, and that's the problem because I got that shouldn't be in there. All right, so now I've got 1. Let's make this Mary Jones. And we'll say she's in the IT program. All right. And that actually we do want. So how did this get screwed up? So T-body, I don't want that. All right, so this will allow me to pretty this up a little bit. All right, so I've got John Smith, I've got Mary Jones, and we'll have here Bob Johnson. All right, hopefully I fixed that up. We'll find out right now. Okay, is that pretty obvious what's going on there? Now, a couple things about this. Notice that by default, the headers are automatically bolded. You don't have to do anything special to do that. All right. Now, one thing we don't have in there is a numeric field. So let's just put one in there. Let's replace, we're going to replace major with salary. Okay. And I'm going to put in here 50, no, I'll just put in 50,000. I'll just put them in as round numbers. So 50,000, 45,000, and 60,000. All right, and I'm going to save that and go back to it. All right, it's kind of hard to tell right here, but virtually everything, I believe at least, automatically gets left justified, even numbers. Now, I could be wrong. We're going to look at it in just a minute. But what I want to get across to you is this. Up until a few years ago, there was no T-head, T-body, and T-foot. You just didn't have them. But again, this is put in there so you can put in extra CSS to make it easier for people who are sight impaired. It'll work just fine if you don't use the T-head, the T-foot, and the T-body. Also, it's weird, up until a few years ago, you had to say the T-head first, then the T-foot, then the T-body, even though the footer appeared at the bottom. You had to put it second. All right, that was just the way it was set up. But tables are made up of table rows. All right, the headers, those are, so the TR is always table row. The TH right there is table header. And when you get into the body, table row, and as you probably guessed, the TD is table data. All right, if I want to, up at the top of my table, you oftentimes see this, and somebody will put in there a caption. All right, and I can just put Rankin Technical College students. Save it, come back to here. And again, well, it should have been students, but you get the idea. All right, and any of the stuff that's in here can easily be changed with CSS. Now, one of the things in next week, hopefully a week from yesterday, when we're going to start on the Bootstrap stuff, Bootstrap gives you all this stuff for free. In other words, all you have to do is add a class. And you add a table class, boom, your table's going to look really nice. Just doing that. You want zebra striping, where every other row is a different kind of color to delineate them. You just put in there basically that you want that class added. All right, so it works really nice. So with that said, that's enough to at least get you started. And you'll notice, again, I've got the T-body and I've got the table tag, right? So tables go within table tags. Normally you don't see a T-foot on here. Most people don't put a footer on, but you can. So I could have come down here and put T-foot, even though there's nothing in there. It would have been totally legit to do that. The tables go within table tags, captions, of course, within caption tags. Your headers and your data go within row tags, etc. If you keep that in mind, the chapter itself is not very long. All right, so if we move on here, we will right now. You'll notice the thing, it's like 20 pages long. All right, it says in the past, tables were commonly used to lay out pages. It's not done like that anymore. You use CSS. Tables should be used for tabular data, period. All right, so the introduction, maybe you like their little picture there better than what I showed you. All right, but you'll notice again the caption goes in the caption tag, the headers go in the TH tags, etc. All right, I don't want to read that to you, but I'll give you a second to take a look at that, and hopefully everything that's in there makes sense. A lot of people tell me they liken the table to a spreadsheet. Yeah, it is similar. All right. So as far as creating a table, again, I went through that with you. I mentioned what the table tag was, what the TR tag was, what the TH tag was, and what the TD tag was. So you've seen all of them. And as they show right here, notice they have also come in here and they've added a class to the table header. And what's that class doing? Well, if we looked at it, it's not showing, it's centering it. Now you look here and you go, well, your published isn't centered. It is centered. The stuff below it is not. But if you look at book and you look here at sales, all right, these are centered under this, and the sales are centered under this. As it says, by default, the width of each column is determined automatically based on its content. What does that mean? Well, that means if I'd have come in here, if I'd have come in here and done this, so Bob's last name is Johnsonberger instead of Johnson. Well, you saw what this looked like. You saw how wide this was. But as soon as I come back in here and save, and then come back to this and refresh, you notice how it got wider. So it auto sizes as necessary is what they're saying. By default, as it says, the content of a TH is bold-faced. I guess it is centered. I thought it was left justified. It's centered, and the TD stuff is always left aligned. But again, you can change that by just coming in and adding classes or adding IDs. All right. So next they talk about, again, the T-head, the T-foot, and the T-body. I've shown those to you, and as it says, it makes it easier to style a table with CSS. I don't even necessarily agree with that. But if you do want to take here, that's the entire head section. So you know you could grab everything there by just applying a class or an ID to T-head. Same thing with a body, etc. All right. How to use CSS properties to format a table. And again, a couple things to look at here. The first one, as it says there up on the top of page 429, is border collapse. All right, it says a keyword that determines whether space exists between borders of adjacent cells. Possible values are collapse and separate. The default is separate. So notice here, with and without collapsed borders. Draw your own conclusion as to which one looks better. All right, if you are creating a website for someone and it needs to have a table, they will typically let you know, hey, man, this sucks. Well, what don't you like about it? Well, I want this, I want this. Okay, then you make the changes. Notice there are CSS3 structural pseudo classes for formatting tables. All right, this is the first time with some of this we've looked at it. Notice nth child. That means if I've got a table, for example, that's got 8 rows in it, all right, and this is confusing because some of the stuff, I probably mentioned this to you earlier, some of the stuff in here when you work with the nth stuff, sometimes it starts with 0 and sometimes it starts with 1. I've never understood the idea behind that, other than trying to screw with people. All right, you can do the first child, you can do the last child, etc. Notice odd and even. It's almost always today, you're going to see when tables are actually, you work with striping and the like that I mentioned, they're bootstrap tables because it's so much easier than having to write any CSS. So if you look in here, that's a heck of a lot of CSS that may or may not make a lot of sense. So notice it says there, even makes silver. And you can see that every other one it looks gray, but it is silver. All right. As it says, they let you format a table without using classes or IDs. I don't remember on your next test will be just on Flexbox. And so it assumes we haven't covered this stuff yet. But when you do your last test, I don't know if it's going to be in there, but by that time, we'll have gone over Bootstrap and you'll learn an easier way to work with tables than what they show here. All right. As it says, we mentioned this in the last chapter. If you want, you can use the fig tag. I don't understand what the advantage of the fig tag is as opposed to to just using a caption tag, except I believe the fig caption here, I believe that's automatically bolded, where you have to add bolding otherwise yourself if you use a caption. Let's see if it says that. It says, although you can use the HTML caption element to provide a caption for the table, it's better semantically to use the figure and fig captions. Okay, so again, you're doing it for people who have some kind of an impairment. All right. Now, merging cells and rows. If you take a look right there, hopefully you notice, see the word book that's up there on the table? That's taking up 2 rows. So you did a row span on that. If you look at sales, you'll notice how sales stretches over 4 columns. You use a col span to do that. You can use one, you can use the other, you can use both, you can use neither. It's kind of like using check boxes that we'll see after the break. All right. So here they've got a row span of 2, that's for the book. Here they've got a col span of 4, and that's for the sales. I mean, most of the stuff, the reason we can go over this fairly quickly, I think at least, is it's pretty intuitive. Some of the stuff we've covered in here, I mean, some of the stuff with grid and with Flexbox may or may not have seemed that intuitive. This just is, because it's been around forever. It's been refined on an as-needed type of basis. All right. So as it says, other things that you can use, we already mentioned the caption or fig caption. As it says here, headers. This looks like a lot of work. And to be honest with you, it kind of is compared to the stuff I showed you. But again, what you can do is it provides you the opportunity to go in with any of that stuff. It helps readers for the blind. And it can help if you want to get in very intricately, want to go in and add some CSS. All right. So as it says, you use these attributes to make it more accessible to visually impaired users who use screen readers. It is legit to put a table within a table. All right. Quite often when you do that, I draw your own conclusions, but I'm looking on the screen here. That's pretty ugly. All right. But you might say, yeah, you could have just gone in there and removed the border around this, and you can do that. Then it would have been hard to know that was a table within a table. All right. But again, you've got a table, and you've got another table within it. As it says here, nested tables in the past were frequently used when tables were used for page layout. All right, you should not do that anymore. Wrapping is an important one. Here's the difference between wrapping and non-wrapping. All right. And again, you want somebody to be able to see all of your table typically, whether they're on a phone or they're not on a phone. And it's not that making them do a pinch or whatever is that difficult a thing. People are used to doing that. And I don't know about you, but especially as I get older and my eyes get worse and worse, I am constantly taking my phone and turning it from portrait to landscape because it makes it easier for me to see. All right. But as it says here, you can use the Whitespace property to keep the table data from wrapping. So basically it's right there. It's the no wrap. It says you can code this for an entire table or for one or more cells which are in a table. Now, this is maybe the key part right here, making a table responsive. All right. So it says the first table after it's reformatted for smaller screens. Well, I'm sorry, I think that's ugly. I wouldn't want it to look like that. All right. Well, how do you want it to look? It depends on what the person you are creating it for, how they want it to look. And again, if I showed this to somebody, that's pretty ugly. I don't like that at all. All right. Well, I mean, how could you fix it? Well, at a minimum, you might want to go and put these two things on one line. See what I'm saying? You might want to push that over to the left, leave that on the right. At least that would make it easier. All right. But again, as always, it depends. So they mention here, to make a table responsive, you can make the table and column widths fluid, and you can reformat the table so that it appears on smaller screens. One way to reformat is with the display property. It says of all the TH and TD elements, make them all start on a new line. But it's a growing process. You try it, this kind of works, this kind of doesn't work, etc., and you keep refining it. And that's it. So I've got 8:52. Let's come back, please, at 10 after 9, and I'm going to pick it up. We are going to actually write some stuff together, and I have created this. Where is it? It's not there. And we're going to create this. We're not going to have the bar at the top, but we're going to create this together. All right, just so you get an idea of how all this stuff works. I'm going to probably send you an email. You already got it, but you may or may not be able to find it. But it's going to have this information in there because I don't want you to have to type that in because that would be ridiculous. All right, so let's take a break.